while some big reveals and some great character revelations make the show even more compelling than it already was. Hey guys, it's Cameron for Westworld, Season 1, Episode 3, The Stray, and I was definitely looking forward to this episode. I have been loving the show so far, and I was definitely looking forward, to seeing what else the show was going to give me, and this was another great episode. I really did love this episode overall. This was definitely more of a transitional character type episode, but we definitely need episodes like this. There's a lot of things we're uncertain about. We got some big reveals in this episode. We got more going on with the characters. I mean, there's really some great stuff going on here, but let's just get into it because, of course, there's a lot to talk about and definitely have a lot to say. We start off with Bernard. He's having a meeting with Dolores, which this seems to be a regular thing. It seems like they have these meetings a lot. He says good morning to her and tells her to bring herself back online, as if anyone else has spoken to her in diagnostics since their last conversation. She says that they haven't and that she's been cleaned and serviced 3 times. No diagnostics, and he asks if she's told anyone of their conversations, and she says that he told her not to, and then he brings her a gift, and that, of course, is a copy of Alice in Wonderland, which he used to read to his son at night. And we really do get more into Bernard's relationship with his son, which, I haven't really taken much know about, but I've definitely noticed they've talked about it in the first episode. We definitely get more into that, but he reads her a passage from the book about Alice commenting on a possible change, and he asks if the passages makes her think of anything, and she says it's just like the other passages they read about change. Because I guess all the other passages they read are about change, which is interesting, and he says people like to read about the things that they want the most and experience the least, and she asks where his son is, and he says nowhere, and she would understand, nowhere she would understand, which to me basically makes me think that, these hosts, they do not understand the concept of human life and death, which is very compelling overall. The fact that they've made these hosts, and they do have human emotions, but they can't comprehend something like death is really interesting, and it makes sense too, because, once they're killed, they're immediately reinvigorated as if nothing happened to them the previous day. They're good as new, so definitely I thought that was interesting to see. Just, again, a very subtle thing that we found out, but definitely, I think that's definitely going to go somewhere, and, she says they've been talking for a while. She's never asked him a personal question, which are an integrating scheme. He tells her to continue. She continues to read the passage, which is about questioning who she is. The next morning, she wakes up in her bed, begins her daily routine, and she then finds the gun that she pulled out of the dirt from in one of her dresser drawers, and she then has another flashback from when the men in black attacked her. Now, we don't see the man in black in this episode except for flashbacks, but she's starting to remember what happened with the man in black, which this is a huge reveal. Knowing that, of course, she's remembering what happened with the man in black, I mean, she's definitely going to go after him. You definitely do get that sense. So back in Sweetwater, William takes a stroll through town. He sees Clementine, gestures to her, and ends up walking in the middle of a shootout hostage situation. And William definitely seems like he definitely is starting to get apt to Westworld. Like, he's really starting to understand what Westworld's like, and he knows how to, live there for himself. So a criminal escapes from the jail, takes Clementine prisoner. He tries to rescue her, but gets shot instead. And as soon as the criminal host turns around, releases Clementine, William gets up. He shoots the host through the heart, which, again, that was crazy, but a cowboy praises him for shooting, says he's going hunting looking for desperados if he wants to join him. Clementine asks if she can at least tempt him inside to express her gratitude. She kisses him, walks away, and again, I like how William isn't just going to have sex, with any host. He's not like Logan in that sense. Logan is someone, who will in fact Logan is someone who will in fact just fuck anyone, but William won't do that. You definitely see that. So Logan goes to him, sees what he did, and sees he got shot. William says he didn't think it was possible. Logan says they can't get killed, but it wouldn't be much of a game if they didn't fight back. That's something I don't think we knew before. These guests can, in fact, get hurt, but they just can't get killed, and definitely, I think that's interesting we saw that. He asks him how he feels. William says that she was terrified. Logan says this is why they exist. He's about to take him to find a woman, and William then tells Logan that he has something else in mind. He shows him the photo of a wanted man. He says that he's been preaching nonstop about all the narratives in the park, but all he does since they've arrived is fuck and drink, and Logan says he's waiting for the good stuff. The bounty is JV shit, and William tells him to stay there, but he wants a little adventure. He wants to be able to go on adventure. He wants to actually do something with his time. He doesn't just want to use it to just fuck women. He doesn't want to do that, which I thought was interesting to see. And I like the contrast between these two. Again, William doesn't really think of them as friends, and you definitely do see that with Logan. Logan definitely is not William's friend, and I like the way that's going. So Cullen goes to Bernard, says she's been looking for him, and he says he got a late start this morning, didn't get much sleep last night. This by far, I forgot to say, is Bernard's most focused episode. Like Bernard really is the main character of this episode. She says to forgive her if she's not sympathetic to the fluctuations of his sleep cycle, tells him about the ongoing investigation about the new update, and then asks about Ford's new storyline. She says she asked him if Ford was going to be a problem. He assured her that he wouldn't be, and he says he can't tell her what he doesn't know, and she says as of this morning, Ford's carved out a huge swath of the park for whatever storyline is cooking up and thrown half of the existing storylines into disarray. And he asks if there's anything he can do. She says to tell her, and says she asked him point blank if the problem with the update was resolved. He says it is, because he feels it is. She asks why people are still pulling hosts from follow-up and says to get his house in order. If there's a problem, he should tell her about it. And you very clearly see that Bernard really does not know the half of it. I mean, when he says, I don't really know what's going on, I think he's sincere. I think he just doesn't really know what's going on here. And, by the way, I think that theory about him being a host, I think it's debunked after this episode. You definitely see that's not the case, but I really did like the way that scene is going, and now that we know the relation that Cole and Bernard have, every scene with them is just so much stronger, because you get the sense that this relationship isn't built on love, it's built more on control and manipulating, and I think it's just really interesting overall, the way that Bernard has gotten himself into the situation he can't really do anything about, and I'm looking forward to really seeing where this goes. So he then walks into Elsie's office, who's interrogating one of the hosts who was actually a victim to Walter's killing, and I like that we actually did go back to this. I thought this was going to be something that was going to be dropped and was only going to be for one episode, but we actually do get back into this, and Bernard said it's amazing how resilient the hosts are, says she was supposed to purge his memory on the last cycle, and she says she will, but Rebus was the last host to interact with Walter, and she shows footage of Walter talking to an anonymous subject named Arnold. We don't know who Arnold is, but this guy clearly is the one that is making everyone see these visions. He's the one that is messing with everyone. I mean, Arnold, clearly there's something going on there. So he says they're designed to play off aberrant behavior. That could explain the conversations. She then explains how he killed 6 hosts, but let the other 3 go. And she pulled the narrative logs, and all 6 of them were actually part of storylines that ended in them killing Walter, which this is extremely interesting. I love where this went. It's like he's holding some type of grudge. She then mentioned that a host has gone stray, so Bernard sends her to retrieve it with Stubbs, and do what's actually in her job description, and you definitely get the sense that Elsie is doing a lot more than what she should be doing, but basically, he says the last thing they need is Colin storming down there and seeing this, and he says he'll do a little more digging, says to get Rebus back upstairs, and she goes to Stubbs, and remember a couple episodes back when I said I thought Stubbs was going to be the annoying, serious asshole? Well, that is definitely not the case out of this episode. This Stubbs I actually really do like. This Stubbs was cracking jokes, he seemed like he was actually having a lot of fun, so I do like this dynamic between Stubbs and Elsie, and already my worry about Stubbs is waning. I'm happy to see that Stubbs is going to be a good character, and that he's not just going to be that annoying asshole kind of, director that's just way too serious, and I'm glad he's not that. So she goes to Stubbs, asks if he lost another one, asks if QA surveillance really this spotty, or does he like the nature walks. He says maybe it's a company. She says if he wanted to cowboy, he could have just used an employee discount. He says the only thing stopping the host from hacking them to pieces is one line of her code. He sleeps with it, and she says that she bets he does. So Teddy then strolls into town, confronts a small gang with a woman sharpshooter. I believe her name was Armistice. If I'm not mistaken, that was Hector's right-hand man, right-hand woman, whatever you want to call it, Armistice. Maeve gets upset that Teddy left a corpse outside her saloon. Then she has a flashback to when she saw Teddy's body inside Westworld headquarters, and Teddy then sees Dolores outside, goes outside to talk to her. Their interactions are pretty much the same way that are in the first episode. They had to nearby field. But this time, Dolores asks if they could leave Sweetwater, which is obviously a huge deviation from the last conversation. And again, it's really starting to show that these hosts are starting to act on their own. They're not really going within their narrative. And she says sometimes she feels like the world out there is calling her, whispering, there's something more. And she says he's traveled all over these parts and asks if there is somewhere they could go. He says that he can take her to a beautiful place down south someday, but Dolores wants to go there now, we see. She doesn't just want to go there someday. She insists on going there now. And Teddy says that he still has some reckoning to do before he can deserve a girl like her, but says they'll go there soon. That evening, they head back to Dolores' ranch, where bandits murder her parents once again. Very hard to watch, but we didn't really see it because, of course, we know what happens. And We then hear gunshots in pitch black. Then we move to a conversation between Teddy and Ford. Ford is reading Shakespeare, says he never met a man like him. He's died at least 1,000 times, and yet it doesn't dull his courage. And I don't know. I just find it really funny that they keep killing him off, Teddy of all people. But he asks him if that's all he aspires to. Teddy talks about Dolores, says maybe someday, soon they'll have the life they've both been dreaming of. And Ford says he never will. And I love how he just straight out says to him, look, you never will have this life. I mean, the life you want is not the life you're ever going to have. And if anything, this is the episode that really shows, what kind of person Ford really is. I mean, Ford is someone that strives to be in control no matter what happens. And even if he's not really in control, he will make sure that he's in control. And we definitely see that. And basically, Ford says he never will, explains to you that his job is not to keep Dolores safe, but it's actually to keep her in Sweetwater, so guests can interact with her if they want the Stalewart's gunslinger and have their way with his girl. So he asks if it ever occurred to him to run away with her. Teddy says he's got some reckoning to do before he does. Ford realizes that he's talking about his mysterious backstory and the reason for his visit, and asks him if he knows why, and says it's because they actually never gave him a backstory. That's why we don't know anything about Teddy. So one, it was just a formal guilt he will never atone, but perhaps it's time he had a worthy story of origin. Asked if he'd like a small part of his new narrative, a fiction that's rooted in truth. Told him the story. It starts in a time of war, a world in flames with a villain called Wyatt. Teddy asks who that is. Ford uploads the story, and immediately Teddy has this knowledge of Wyatt. And this really does add to Teddy's story. I like where we're going this, because Teddy says, of course, he does. He says he looks upon the face of true evil. It's very hard to forget. He claimed he could hear the voice of God. Started down Escalante. Army was sent to put down the natives. Bad business. Wyatt was a sergeant and went missing, and he came back a few weeks later with some pretty strange ideas. So we immediately know there's something going on there. We don't really know what it is, but the next day a couple of hosts, including the one that Elsie was analyzing, and he guessed, they actually confront Dolores, but Teddy comes to her rescue, makes them get away, realizing that it's their battle to lose, and I love the way they were intimidated by him. Really well done scene. Teddy then goes to Dolores and then takes her to a range, teaches her how to shoot a pistol. However, she can't bring herself to pull the trigger, and he says probably for the best, and we don't know why exactly that's going on, but something I'm really loving about the show is that everything that we are so uncertain about in an episode gets answered in that episode. And I really do like a lot of the smaller things like this. They could have stretched this out, but no, they actually do answer it here. The sheriff arrives with a posse, says he's killed an entire settlement out near Flat Rock, many men, women, and children, and he thinks that they found Wyatt and the man for program into Teddy's past. Teddy rides off with the sheriff, but promises that he'll be back soon, so he's kind of going on his own place with Wyatt. So Elsie and Stubbs approach a group of hosts who have gotten stuck in the loop thanks to the stray hosts. They were due in town for the cattle drive over 2 days ago. The host that went missing had to have been the woodcutter, and he asked if they can program one of them to make a fire. She says they could, but QA has added weapon locks to the hosts, which is why Dolores couldn't pull the trigger. Again, really interesting overall. I don't think we knew this, but apparently all of the hosts have weapon locks, which is understandable. Knowing that they're starting to go rogue and acting on their own, obviously it's probably the right thing to do to keep weapon locks. I mean, it's probably just the smart thing to do, knowing that they could strike out at any time. I mean, you can tell that Ford is definitely scared. He's kind of scared, and he's starting to realize, I think, that he can't really control them, but at the same time, he's trying to keep things as, business-like and as easy as usual. He's trying to do that. So, and as rational as well. So basically, the stray was the only one authorized to use an axe, so his friends can't cut wood to make supper. They head to the host tent and see some wood carvings he made, and Elsie notices that several have a constellation carved into their back, which, if you remember, Kissy had in the first episode. It was actually that map that led the man in black to where he wanted to go. But this overall is getting very interesting. Why they have this constellation, we don't really know. But Teddy explains to Sheriff that he wasn't always tracking Wyatt down. He was a sergeant and his friend. However, everything changed when Wyatt disappeared. While out of maneuvers, he came back with some strange ideas, claimed the land doesn't belong to the old natives or the new settlers. It belonged to something that had yet to come and belonged to him. So Teddy then comes across several, which, again, very interesting story. So we don't know what he's exactly talking about, but definitely get the sense that this is not his land or even Ford's land. It's someone else. And Teddy then comes across several rotting and bloated bodies tied to a tree, but one of them is still alive. I'm getting the impression that Wyatt kind of knows what's going on, and Wyatt kind of has knowledge that this isn't real. Definitely I'm starting to get that sense, but the bodies were trapped. Wyatt and his men open fire on the sheriff's posse. Teddy, the sheriff, and one of the guests decide to move forward to confront Wyatt, and Elsie and Stubbs then walk through the desert. Stubbs mentions that he plotted a line from the work camp to their present location, and Satcom picked up these images he's vectoring not just not to home base, and says to keep going that direction. He tells her to keep staring, and maybe will tell her horoscope. She asks what he means. He says that the woodcarver's markings is actually the constellation Orion, and she asks if he's Galileo. He says maybe it's in his backstory, and again, I like the interactions between these two. I wasn't expecting to like as much as I did, but it was actually kind of fun. So Bernard then goes to Ford, and we get by far the highlight scene of this episode. This scene was just incredible, because Ford so far has been very much a blank slate. I mean, we were introduced to this character, and the fact that even the guests, not the guests, but the people working there know zero to nothing about Ford is just really compelling overall, and immediately got me introduced, interested in his character. But it seems like Bernard is basically Ford's protege. He's the one he will reveal everything to, and we definitely get that sense. So he says he was hoping to run something by him. Ford says he was chasing inspiration, says the tricky thing weaving the old into the new, says to give him a moment, and he then goes to a man, literally chews him out for covering the host, which again was very interesting, saying that the hosts don't need to be covered. He didn't want him to feel cold or ashamed. He wanted to cover his modesty, and he uncovers him, says it doesn't get cold or feel ashamed or feel a solitary thing that they haven't otherwise told them to. So we then go, which again, crazy scene, but it really does show how passionate he is about this and how much he strives to make them not human. You definitely see that. So he goes back to Bernard and asks what he can do for him. Bernard says he thought it best they speak in private. Ford says he thought that they agreed to put these questions to rest. Bernard says they did, but what if they misdiagnosed the original problem? He says they may have treated the system rather than the disease, which could still be out there. He says Abernathy and Walter were exhibiting other aberrancies beyond memory recall of previous builds. They were hearing voices, they were talking to someone. He doesn't really know what's going on. And Ford says that it's actually a simple cognitive dissonance, and Bernard says he'd agree, but they were talking to some imaginary person, a man named Arnold, and says he doesn't think he told him the entire truth of the situation. Ford says he did what they do there is complicated. He reveals that he once actually had a silent partner named Arnold who helped him create Westworld, and I don't think we knew about this before, but we definitely didn't know about this before. This was an incredible reveal. I love this overall. Arnold wanted to actually create consciousness as opposed to mimicking it. He imagined it as a pyramid and create a program that made the hosts hear their thoughts as voices called the bicameral minds. The idea that primitive men believed his thoughts to be the voice of the gods. Bernard says he thought it was debunked, and Ford says it's a theory of understanding the human mind, but not as a blueprint for hosts he built, one for them with the hopes that in time their own voices would take over, without realizing they would actually screw up with the host programming. He didn't realize, the impact it was going to have. But that program seems to be what's causing the host to malfunction, and Arnold seems to be the one that's calling out to them. So Bernard asks what's happened to Arnold. Ford says that he died at the park. His personal life was marked by a tragedy. He put all of his hopes into his work. His search for consciousness completely consumed him, and he barely spoke to anyone. He was so obsessed with this, with trying to make the hosts real, and he said he saw something in them and that wasn't there. They called it an accident, but he knew Arnold and he was very, very careful, and says the update should prevent any further voices, but he will let him know if any of the hosts display or exhibit any unusual behavior. He also tells Bernard to remember that the hosts aren't real and he can't make Arnold's mistake, which I kind of get the sense that Bernard's going to end up doing. He already is a lot more sympathetic to the hosts than Ford is, and Bernard asks why he would. Ford says that he knows the death of Bernard's son Charlie still weighs heavily on him, and now we know what happened to Bernard's son. Charlie did in fact die, and I liking that reveal, because we know there was that scene with Stubbs, where Stubbs said to Bernard, do you have kids at home? And now we know that Bernard's son is in fact dead, and that really sets up the next scene very well. So Bernard then calls his ex-wife on the phone and talks about how busy he is. And the way the phone was done was kind of like a Skype conversation, kind of cool the way it was done, but definitely shows that we are in some sort of futuristic world, and that's something the show has done really well. It's never actually revealed what year the show's in. This definitely confirms that technology is a lot more advanced, and I like seeing that. But and I know that they've definitely alluded to that. I'm just saying this kind of confirms that. But the conversation quickly turns to Charlie and how much they miss him, and really good scene overall. I like that you can see that they both are really missing him. They feel that void in their life, and especially the way his wife is talking about, she feels like her life is kind of incomplete, and it seems like that's the thing that got these two separated. And I don't know if she knows about him and Cullen, but We'll have to see where that's going to go. Elsie then asks Stubb why the host would carve a constellation, as he wasn't programmed to care about the stars. She goes vectoring and finds a stray host stuck in between two large rocks, which is really weird overall. So Teddy, the sheriff, and the guest get ambushed in the dark by a group of masked men. Two of them kill the sheriff. Teddy tells the guest to run. As he gets cornered by a second group of men, Teddy starts shooting. None of the men seem affected by the bullets, which implies that they're actually guests, or they're just not programmed to act like other hosts. So we don't really know how that happened, but they seem completely unaffected. I'm assuming they might be guests, but I honestly don't know. I mean, again, this was a story that was recently created for Teddy, so it would make sense if they were guests, but I really don't know at this point. So Elsie calls Bernard, leaves a message that she thinks the host got an idea to come out to the wilderness, and Bernard's not answering because he's actually interrogating Dolores once again. He says he needs her help, says he needs to decide what to do with her. He thinks he made a mistake and was just fascinated with being selfish, but he thinks it would be better if he restored her to the way she was before, and she asks if there's something wrong with her. He says no, and this was just such a great scene because Bernard, now knowing the information he knows about Arnold, knows he can't get too close to the host, but you can tell he feels this deep connection. Like, he really talks to them like they're actually humans. He clearly does respect them, but he thinks that it would be better if he restored her to the way she was before. She doesn't understand it, though. You know, she doesn't understand that. And he says, no, the place she lives in is a terrible place for her. She says, some people chose to see the ugliness in the world. He tells her to lose all scripted responses and use improvisation only. She asks if he's saying she's changed, and he says to imagine there are two versions of herself, one that feels these things and asks those questions, and one that's safe. And he asks which one she'd rather be. She says she's trying, but she still doesn't understand, says there aren't two versions of her, there's only one, and when she discovers the new one, she'll be free. So we asked what prompted that response. She says she doesn't know. She asks if she's done something wrong or made a mistake, and he says evolution forged the entirety of sentient life on this planet using one tool, the mistake, and he says it appears that she's in good company. He then tells her about the time that he actually taught Charlie to swim, about how for hours he clung to his arm while practicing his kicks. He was too scared to let go, and he was too scared to let him, even though that's what parents are supposed to do. Ultimately, though, he does decide to keep Dolores the way she is, and I thought it was a really well done scene. But again, it definitely begs the question, is Bernard already getting too close to the guest? You definitely get that sense. So in Sweetwater, Dolores finds out that Teddy likely died in the hills. I mean, seriously, James Marsden really hopefully is getting a really good paycheck because he's literally dying in every single episode, and that takes commitment. It really does. For him to die in every episode and still get a decent paycheck and still want to be a series regular is beyond me. I have no idea why James Marsden would continue to do that, but they're doing a really good job with this character, and I'm pretty sure they're going to kill him off in every episode. That's what it seems like to me, but she then heads home to find the bandits have killed her parents. One of the bandits drag her into the barns to rape her, but Dolores takes his gun, shoots him in the neck, and this seems to overcome her weapons lock. Somehow she's broke it, and she has a flashback to seeing the man in black. She then rides off into the hills after seeing another bandit shoot her mother, and we don't really know what's going to happen there, but Stubbs climbs into the rocks to retrieve the host. He begins cutting off the host's head with a saw, but the host wakes up, attacks Stubbs. The host then climbs up, grabs a small boulder, bashes its own head in as Elsie looks on in horror. I'm assuming the host did this to cover up any evidence of what was really going on, because they know that they're on to them and they're trying to do whatever they can to make sure that they don't get onto them. So the episode then ends in this very interesting way. We see Logan and William, they're sitting around a campfire. Logan says he can't believe he let him talking to this shit $40K a day to jerk off alone in the woods, playing white hat. William asks if he heard that. Logan says he'll take anything to relieve the boredom, and Dolores suddenly stumbles up to them, collapses into William's arms, and that's how the episode ends. We don't know what's going on there or why she's there, but that is the way the episode ends overall. Very interesting stuff. Let's just get into this episode because there really is a lot to talk about with where we are headed going forward. So overall, this was another really interesting episode. I liked finding out a lot of the backstories of the characters, particularly, like I said, now knowing what's going on with Arnold, there's a lot more theories coming in. I now have this theory that Arnold isn't dead. I mean, some people are thinking that Arnold's not dead. I think that he somehow has been controlling them. We don't really know how, but he has been tapping into their human abilities. I think that he wanted Ford to think that he died, but I think he actually faked his death. he actually put something in the update that gave them more human abilities, and he's been the one that's been messing with them. Because if you listen to the voice that always tells them to remember, it doesn't sound like Ford, it doesn't sound like Bernard. That leaves Arnold to be the only person that it could possibly be. So I'm thinking that Arnold really is the head of all the shit that's really going down, all the chaos that's going on with the host, everything about that. That's all because of Arnold. I think overall that's very interesting. And honestly, now knowing the story of Arnold, I like seeing an entire episode of Ford and Arnold's relationship. Now that we have, one of the, key relationships of the series, it seems, is Ford and Bernard. Let's get into Ford and Arnold's relationship. What was it like? Is it exactly the way that Ford said it, or was there more to it? That's something I'm sure I could definitely see him doing, and I honestly think they are going to do, but we'll have to see. I really would love to see that. I do really like where we're headed with Dolores. Where is she going with Logan and William? What is she going to do with them? We don't really know, but clearly she is going to take them under her wing. We don't know what she's really going to do, but William clearly does care about the host. We've seen that. He tries to treat them like they're normal beings, and I think it's going to be interesting to see what ends up happening with that. We'll have to see. I'm thinking she's going to confront the Man in Black, because she keeps remembering all these flashbacks of the Man in Black. Eventually, she's going to remember what he did, and she's probably going to want to confront him. That's what I'm thinking is going to happen, but we'll have to see really what ends up happening with that, because that's going to be very interesting. Obviously, the host did it, bash his own head in, probably just to cover up evidence. He doesn't want Stubbs to know what's going on. But what is the deal with these constellations? There's clearly something going on there. We don't really know why these constellations are there, what they really mean. Why are the hosts suddenly interested? We don't know. I think it's another side effect of what, of what he did, but I don't know, of what Arnold did, but I don't know. We'll have to see. I think that's going to be interesting. Bernard and Dolores' relationship is one that's very compelling, and it's mainly because while Bernard does treat her like she's a host, he seems to very much respect her, and he treats her like she's a human, and I get it. It's because, she's the original one, and, she feels like, he feels like he's been close to her a long time. I mean, we still don't know how long Bernard's been working there, but Dolores clearly is the original. We heard from the first episode, she is the original sentience. So definitely they have some sort of a relationship, and I don't know if he's really going to listen to Ford. I know Ford said straight out, you got to remember that these aren't humans, but already Bernard seems like he's going against his word, and he is treating Dolores like she is a human. So I don't really know where that's going to go. I think that's going to be interesting. I'm looking forward to getting more into his relationship with his ex-wife and Charlie. I think overall that's going to be very interesting to see where that goes. Teddy, like I said, I think they're going to kill off Teddy in every episode this season, which is really ballsy, but I think that's really where they're going to go with that. We'll have to see what's going to happen there, but as far as Walter goes, how does he remember what's going on? I think overall that's going to be very interesting. And I think really what Arnold's main mission, in my opinion right now, what he's trying to do, is he's trying to get them out of this recurring loop and out of this cycle and get them to wake up, realize what's going on, realize that this is a serious situation, and get them to finally act out. He hasn't been able to. He feels like he's going to be the one to get them to act out. I mean, clearly, Ford is very inherently against it. We've seen this very well, but I don't think he's actually dead. I think Arnold is somehow out there. I don't know in what capacity, but we'll have to see. I think that's going to be very interesting to find out, if he's alive and if he's out there. And if he is, I mean, I definitely won't be surprised if they do that. We'll have to see where that goes. Bernard and Colin's relationship also is very compelling. I like the way that that's going. I think overall that's very interesting. Overall, guys, just some really interesting plot points in this episode. I really did like it overall. My only question is, how was Dolores able to break the gun lock? I don't know how, the weapon lock. I don't know how she was able to do that. If someone did it for her or if she did it on her own, I honestly don't know. But I don't know a lot of what's going to happen, and that's one of the reasons I love that. I can't really predict what's going to happen on the show. I really do love where the show is headed. Let me know what you guys thought of this episode. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. What do you think is really going on? That's my review. Hope you guys enjoy it. We'll see you guys in my next video, which will be for tonight's episode of Supergirl, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.